So, time to get these in the trunk and get these bad boys installed. Let's go. Yo, what's up guys? It's your boy Shanus inside the car. Forgive the scrubbiness. I actually work today, but I'm actually going to drop off the N Line to get the lowering springs installed. However, this is of course not going to be an install video. It's going to be more of a review. Take pictures, you know, side profile, and at least of the front and back, again, before the install and after, so that way you guys could see. And then of course I'll just kind of show off the vehicle itself, but at the same time I'm going to make sure that we drive the crap out of the car, not like super hard, but I definitely want to drive it and just kind of put it into like some interesting bends and curves and whatnot, just to kind of get a feel of how good these springs are feel wise, and of course how they react, how they perform, and how they feel comfort wise, because the N Line is kind of that borderline comfort slash sporty car, or luxury slash sporty car. So yeah, let's get straight into that. All right, cool. So we're at the destination. I actually figured, because we're not really going to get a lot of time to see these, I figured I'd show you guys what they look like. In the pictures, they were white. So I'm kind of glad I took this out, because seeing them in gray is, whatever, it throws me off. I thought it was going to be a little bit more closer matching to the paint, but it is what it is. But I can't wait to see what these guys end up looking like on the actual vehicle. So all four, there we go. Anyways, you're probably wondering, what am I going to be driving since I'm leaving this vehicle here? And I've always said that we have a lot of crazy Optimas in San Diego. So check this thing out. Hopefully I don't rub. I love this color too. It's just so different, because a lot of people don't really do like unique colors. So anyways, homeboy said like, hey, go wild, go nuts. Yeah, right, dude. I'm just going to drive to work and then leave it parked and chilling. So yeah, I don't know if the audio quality was pretty good about earlier, but anyways, for the people that are probably gonna ask about mods, so it's actually has a blood type racing tune before the whole fallout issue of their tuner. So this thing trips wheels pretty nicely. So yeah, but before we go, I'm actually just gonna show you kind of what it looks like before, so you can see, at least in the front, you know, this car is pretty low for a stock car in my eyes, but like, yeah, there's still a noticeable gap. So definitely lowering springs are going to enhance that. If we get closer, you'll see this wheel gap right here, the wheels, right? There's let's see, you know, at least a solid 3 fingers, you know, maybe 4. And again, I have bigger hands, so, you know, do without what you will, but we'll definitely see, hopefully, an improvement. I'm actually gonna take pictures real quick before I leave of the height front and back, and then we'll also just measure, I guess, the wheel gap, and then I'll post the pictures in the video, and then we'll do the after. Alright guys, so we got the car back. It's actually been a few weeks since I've had it lowered, and the reason why I'm filming this quite a bit late is because I honestly wanted to give you guys an honest review of the springs themselves, and essentially just the way it looks. So we just got the car washed, and I know I just kind of did a little pan around under a different setting, so I just kind of want to show you what it looks like from the front. We're going to get a little low, and as you can see, there's still a decent enough clearance. The springs are rated to drop the vehicle a different amount. I believe it was 1.2 in the front and just 0.9 in the rear. I'll go ahead and put the measurements if I'm off, but look at how good it looks. I mean, it's a very subtle drop. It's not extremely rough, though I will be honest, speed bumps are not your friend, and they never are when you have a lowered car. But the car itself just looks exceptional. So I didn't really take video, but I took pictures of the measurements before, and of course we're here because we're going to do the after measurements. And I'm just showing you, I'm doing a walk around, and I know you already saw a walk around, but again, I'm just showing you, like, this is against a curb, and it looks so good. So with that being said, let's get out the measuring tape, because that's the important part that you guys want. Oh, and then for just consistency's sake, as you can see, particularly up against this particular curb, the car is actually quite at the same height. So the only discrepancy or disclosure, I guess I should state, is that this will be a hit and miss depending on the bumps, depending on the curbs you pull up on, and depending on where you park. It's still high enough where some of them that are low profile you'll clear and you'll be able to park perfectly, but it's also low enough now to the point where the really high ones, you're probably definitely going to want to be careful because you're not going to clear it. So with that being said, let me go ahead and measure the front from the bottom all the way to essentially the front lip section of the front bumper. Alrighty, so we're getting down low. The previous clearance was 8 inches from the ground all the way up to the top. So as you can see, it's actually pretty spot on as far as what it was rated at. So you can see that it's just above, actually just under 7 inches. So remember, I mentioned that it did state that the front would lower 1.2 inches. So if you go from 8 to just under 7, 1.2 is actually credible. So that's actually exactly what it was. And I'll show you just one more time so you guys can see for reference sake. There you go. And so being said, it did drop it a little bit. Now wheelbase, so let's go here to the front wheel. So originally from the bottom all the way to the top arch, it was about just under 28 inches, a little bit over 27. So we're gonna go ahead and adjust this measuring tape and let's see how exactly it fares. So as you can see, we're going down there and then literally just going all the way up. And there we go. Again, like I said before, it was around this area, but now it's literally 26 and a half, almost exactly, from all the way to the bottom, all the way to the top. Now, of course, also depending on your tires and depending on inflation, because if you're running a little less air or a little more, this will vary slightly, but that is what you can see. We'll go to the back. And you do gotta forgive me as well because I did not do a comparison of the rear tire when before I lowered it. So apologies, but so here, this is the rear wheel. And I'm trying to make sure this is as straight as possible, but the story back here is a little different. It is almost exactly 27 inches, actually a little higher. It's just the camera doesn't really show it because I'm not leaning against it. There you go, just above 27. And again, that makes sense because the rear was only supposed to lower 0.9 as opposed to the 1.2 in the front. So you can't tell the difference with your eyes, but of course that's why we're measuring things. And I'm just gonna back away again because it just looks so good. I love how subtle it was. Again, as far as the comfort, it's actually quite comfortable still. You don't lose a lot of that, but like I mentioned, bumps, speed bumps are not your friend. It's gonna feel a little quite rougher over speed bumps, but that's to be expected. And if you're watching this channel, I expect that you're experienced with like tuning vehicles and all that, so you're probably not a stranger to that feeling. Now this next one's going to be a little hard because it's just very compact and I can't really get in there, but one measurement that I focused on beforehand as well was that it was about a 2-inch gap between the actual top of the tire to the top of the wheel well. Now it does seem like, and this is really hard doing it from the outside, but it's probably less. I'm sorry, it's probably just a little over an inch. It used to be a 3-finger gap in there, but as you can see, I can't do that anymore. It's now basically 2 fingers, and the same could be said for the rear. I do believe, again, because the rear got dropped less, it's a little more, but yeah, this one's exactly 2 fingers, not as snug as the front because there's just a little extra, but definitely not a 3-finger gap. And of course I do have beastly hands, so might be different from your hand size, but good rule of thumb in a sense. 2-finger gap instead of a 3-finger gap. So there is a difference. Now, while we're on the side, another thing I did not measure was actually the distance from the side skirt to the floor. So I'll go ahead and do that now. And you're looking at roughly almost exactly 7 inches. So again, it was quite literally just under, I believe. Let me see again. Yeah, it was exactly just under the 7-inch mark. So take that for what you will. If you need to measure your vehicle, because it's still stock, you know, just to kind of see your clearances, just under 7 inches once it's lowered. All right, and the last but not least, the last measurements I took were from the rear. I actually took 2 measurements back here. I took some from the center and also from the exhaust tips, because again, while the center may clear, your exhaust tips may not, because of course they sit lower. So if I focus on this particular little splitter right here, it is now at, so originally this was just shy right here of about 14 inches. Now, not sure how well you can tell, but it's basically right at 13 inches. So again, just it's all just in line with the stated drop rate. But for the exhaust, it was about 11.25. But now from the bottom, and this one's really hard to gauge just because it's slanted, but I would probably say about above 10 inches. And again, it's really hard, but yeah, just slightly above 10 inches. And keep in mind, take that with a grain of salt, because it is slanted, so you can't really like have measuring tape slanted. But yes, it is about an inch lower than it was before. And again, that's just in line with the advertised drop. So there we have it, guys, your measurements. To summarize, pretty much everything in the rear dropped just about an inch, maybe a little less, which again makes sense because the rears are rated at dropping about a 0.9. And again, keep in mind also that this is already settled. For those of you guys that have no idea what I'm talking about, so once you lower a car with just lowering springs and technically coilovers as well, you do not want to do measurements or kind of any testing as soon as you lower the car, because those suspension components, and forgive me for the wind breeze, but those suspension components still have to settle. So essentially, once you leave it overnight, about a day or two, typically within 24 hours, the springs may still drop a bit until they settle into their final, essentially like height. So once more, the rear is rated at a 0.9 drop, give or take, and that's pretty consistent with the measurements we've given you, whereas the front is a much more aggressive 1.2 inch drop, and again, that is also consistent with the measurements that we've had. So it's not static, it's not to the point where you're going to be low by any means, to the point where you're scraping. You can still clear a lot. You do have to, however, be careful with certain curbs, certain non-low profile parking barriers, I suppose you could call them. And then lastly, the other thing that I would also be mindful, aside from your tire choice and of course the PSI of inflation that you decide to go with, is the fact that you also have to align the vehicle. And this car was aligned. While the front was able to be aligned without any issue, the rear, unfortunately, is essentially cambered a slight amount. You cannot essentially align it perfectly after you lower it with springs. It's just one of those things, it's hit or miss. And again, in this vehicle, unfortunately, that significant slight drop makes that big of a difference. But it's also not to the point where I believe that you're gonna have excess wear, because as you can see, it's still quite straight. It's not cambered like a huge amount. You can kind of tell from this angle that there's just a tiny bit of poke from the rear lower part of the tire, of the wheel, as opposed to the top. You can kind of tell. So that's just a disclaimer that I want to give you. These are the numbers if you care. So just be mindful of that if you're very cautious, I suppose, about tire wear. But I honestly believe that if you're watching this channel, you're watching this video, if you bought an N Line or any type of sportier model, that's probably not at the top of your list. I already see people honestly even swapping out these particular tires, so take that for what it's worth. Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy back at home base, and I'm recording this back here because unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, the park had a lot of loud noise. This is just kind of the exiting notes because these are the things that people have asked me and kind of want to know. Specifically for anybody that's actually driven this car in like sport or sport plus mode and taken turns, This thing already had the confidence with the fact that the ECU tuning for, the tuning for the dual clutch transmission is just so spot on that when you basically enter a turn, it has like an aggressive downshift, so you can just basically power out just like a monster, because the power that this car has is just intense. So think about the fact that now that you're lowered, it just adds a ton more confidence, where the vehicle is just more agile and it's able to turn turns harder and faster. And the nice thing is you don't have a lot of body roll, to the point where fortunately this car actually has power bolsters that you can actually bolster the seat and make it a little tighter. You're definitely going to need it. I personally am a bigger guy and I have it at the most relaxed setting, and believe me when I say that I'm able to take turns to the point where I'm kind of leaning a bit, so I need that extra reinforcement. It is such an amazing feeling. For those of you guys asking about skipping because of like just the power, since it's so torquey, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I have not used launch control or anything like that. I'm honestly still kind of babying the car, but the car itself delivers the power very nicely and very evenly, to the point where actually you don't feel, because like I said, the center of gravity is just lower, you don't feel the sudden acceleration. Like, it doesn't throw you back in your seat as much as it does with the stock suspension, because it is a little softer, but the speed is still there. So you do slightly lose a little sense of speed, but it's still there. Be careful, look down at the speedometer, because you're probably speeding. That's just how great this car is. So for those of you guys asking for the price, these springs were, at the time of that I bought them, they were about $290 including shipping, so $290 even, and I highly recommend them. I couldn't take a lot of pictures of the actual springs themselves just because they're kind of that grayish white, so they don't really stand out, which is actually kind of a positive because they're so subtle. They kind of blend in very well, so it doesn't really seem like it's modified for those of you that are trying to be unsuspecting, again, because the car's not scraping. So there's just a lot of positives. Like I said, the only thing is speed bumps aren't your friend. But other than that, there's still quite a bit of comfort in the car, assuming that you don't live in a super bumpy like pothole area. California, sadly, we do have quite a few roads that are pretty messed up, but for the most part, I didn't have like a back-breaking experience where I was like regretting the decision. But guys, that wraps up pretty much kind of like my review, and of course the showing of how great these springs look, how great they feel. Like I said, for the price, I would definitely pull the trigger. This is probably a really good midpoint, only because for those of you guys that are comfortable or used to lowering your vehicle or just modifying, there are more aggressive springs out there. Well, maybe not currently, but there will definitely be more aggressive springs out there eventually. One of the biggest brands, Eibach, that makes springs typically has two sets, where there's like a street set, and then there's another one where it's essentially still street, but it's very aggressive to the point where it's like 2-inch drop, you're super tucked, and then you have like negative camber. I know from experience from putting them on another car. So if you really want that, then I guess I would wait it out. But I think this set of springs is just the perfect adjustment for both the performance and of course for the looks. I honestly can't complain. It's kind of the best of both worlds. With that being said, if I missed anything and you guys have any questions, please feel free to comment down below. I will do my best to answer. As always, guys, just expect more goodies because there's just a lot more to come. There's a lot of things that I want to cover. Thank you for all the love and support, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. Sit rep real quick. I'm driving to work. I'm in the Kia. I shouldn't be driving and filming, but this car's got juice. Like, I literally just barely tapped on the throttle, and already like you can feel a huge difference over just a stock Kia. You just heard it downshift. I hope so. I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to be all. Did you hear that? Dude, you can hear the turbo spool up on this. It's so nuts. It's such a cool car.